Good morning. Welcome to our town hall session to discuss the upcoming market study. I'm Cheryl Probst. I work here in Human Resources. And today's meeting is to introduce you to the upcoming project by CBIZ Human Capital Services to update WSU's compensation and classification systems. There's been a team with representatives from the university support staff and unclassified professional staff who have been meeting with CBIZ representatives. Members of this team include Frankie Kirkendall, Director of Human Resources, Libby Gilbert, Assistant Director of Human Resources, Lana Anthus, Associate Director of Human Resources, Matthew Johnston, Associate Director of Human Resources, Kim Sinelli, Assistant Director of HR, Cheryl Probst, Training Manager, Shelley Kellogg, Administrative Officer and Assistant to the Director of HR, Tammy Raines, Compensation Assistant, Mary Herron, Vice President of Administration and Finance and a member of the President's Executive Team, Wade Robinson, Vice President for Student Affairs, Francisco Gonzalez, Executive Director of EEO, Linnea Glenn May, Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs, Steve White, Director of Purchasing, Allie Levine, USS Senate President, Brian Carter, USS Senator, Randy Sessions, USS Senator, Brett Morrill, UP Senate President, Kathy Downs, UP Senator, Trish Gandu, Assistant to the Dean of Students and Student Engagement, Jerry Antes, Director of NIAR, and Amy Easom, Client Service Manager, Strategic Communications. To get us started, Brett Morrill, our UP Senate President, and Allie Levine, USS Senate President, will share some insight into the upcoming project.
Thank you, Cheryl. Good morning, everybody. Hope you're all doing well. Glad to see you're all here. I feel personally that this is a very important meeting to help us get off to a good start. When I first heard about this, one of the things that I got to thinking right off the bat was, wait a minute, what are you guys doing here? Why are you digging around in my position? What's happening? Yes, it made me feel a little uncomfortable. But then as I started participating in the conference calls that we had, I began to realize a couple of things. Number one, this is a great opportunity for us. It's a great opportunity for us to tell the university what we do, to help update our position descriptions. Because I know out there some of them are a little old, maybe 5, 10, 15 years, and they really don't reflect what we really do here at the university anymore. As we start moving toward that innovation campus, or more importantly, as President Bardo is starting to talk about, becoming the innovation university, we really need to take a look at what do we, as all of us, USS and UPs, do here? And how does that relate to what's out there in the general market? Because if we are going to attain that vision of becoming the innovation university in Kansas and the nation, and perhaps even internationally, we're going to need to retain the good people that are here and then help supplement that with good people to work with, so that we have even better colleagues coming on board. But in order to do that, we need to understand where we are first and how we relate to the market and how we can compete. So this is a great opportunity. Recognize it may feel a little uncomfortable up front, but if you don't seize this opportunity, or if we don't seize this opportunity, we're just going to be falling back on the job descriptions that are already out there. And we won't have taken this opportunity to actually say what it is that we do. So I highly encourage you, please take the time to fill out the JAQ that you're going to hear about today, the Job Analysis Questionnaire. And if you manage people, supervise people, please give them time to fill it out and encourage them to fill it out. And that way, we can get the information that we need. Thank you.
If I could just add something, all of the other region institutions, except for K-State, I believe, are also going through this process or have just finished it in the case of KU. So I actually spoke with some of the staff at KU, and they assured us that this was perfectly fine. It took a little time to fill out the JAQ, but no positions were eliminated, and we've been assured that no positions will be eliminated as a result of this process. At KU, there were actually some pay increases, but I don't think we can count on that due to some budget issues. But just to let you know, that's another thing to keep in mind when you're completing it. So that's all I had.
With that, we'll turn it back over to Cheryl so that she can introduce our guest today.
First of all, thank you to Brett and Allie. Appreciate that. Today we're going to have an overview of the market study process. Afterwards, we'll have a time for an open Q&A. To present the overview is Edward Rawtaw from CBIZ Human Capital Services. Ed?
How's everybody doing today? Well, good. Let me make sure that this works. I guess by way of brief introduction, my name is Ed Rawtaw, and I'm the Managing Director of Compensation Consulting for CBIZ Human Capital Services. We service clients from coast to coast, and as a couple people have alluded to, have been through this process recently with KU, went through it with the KU Med Center, and are working with a number of the other Regents institutions on this project. I'm based in St. Louis, a certified compensation professional, which means I've passed a few tests, have the background and credentials, quoted in a number of publications and the like. But I want to start with just a brief story. Some of you may have been looking at me just a little bit funny as I took the stage, and so I think I owe you an explanation. I'm the proud father of a 6-year-old little girl, and like any parent, I am wrapped around her finger. As a consultant, I travel all over the country. And so today I'm in Wichita. Actually, tonight I'll be in San Diego. I may be in Houston later on this week. As you can imagine, a 6-year-old little girl misses her daddy when he travels. So I made a deal with my daughter. I said, sweetheart, every time daddy goes away on business, you can choose one article of my clothing. You don't have to tell me what it is, but why don't you just put it in my suitcase, and then when I open my suitcase, I'll put it on and I'll think about you. So if anybody had any questions about the socks that I'm wearing today, in bright green and orange, they were selected by a 6-year-old, so. What we want to accomplish today, from a high-level overview, there are a number of things that we want to do. First and foremost, this is an opportunity to kick off the compensation classification system. So while I have some prepared slides and remarks and want to go through at a high level, we're all here today to answer your questions. So we'll provide an overview, but certainly here to answer questions as well. By the same token, we want to maintain expectations. When people hear that a compensation consultant has been hired, sometimes they think fantastic thoughts, sometimes they think terrible thoughts. So I want to talk a little bit about what are the expectations, or what should the expectations be as a result of this process. We'll provide an overview of the plan design and what those outcomes look like, what the process is. It's important to understand the amount of not only work, but the quality of data, I think more importantly, that goes into this type of analysis. And then finally, communicate next steps. We'll talk about that at the end. And then finally, bold and underlined on the screen, answer your questions. I can talk about this stuff all day long. Some of people on my team may tell you that they've seen me do it. But it's not about me up here just talking to you all. If I'm not addressing your questions or addressing your needs, we haven't been successful today. So I want to make sure that we leave plenty of time at the end to address those questions. And as you can see, we'll have a number of representatives up here to answer any question you might have. In terms of the scope of the analysis, we've been engaged to do a number of things. So first and foremost, we're going to be looking at job classifications and descriptions. That really takes two different paths, so to speak. On the classifications, it's our understanding, it would be fairly typical in an institution like Wichita State University, that we may have people with the same job title and they're actually doing different things. They have completely different jobs. And so we want to make sure that we clarify those classifications, that we identify the right job titles and the right descriptions. We might find the opposite is true in some cases as well, where we have people who are doing the same work, but they may have different job titles. You know, over time, these things tend to evolve, and so it's really an opportunity to clean up the system from a classification perspective. After that, we're going to be updating all of the job descriptions. As we heard earlier, some of them, the position descriptions or job descriptions may be a year old, some of them may be 5, 10, or even 15 years old. I suspect there may be some that are older than that. And so not only bring them up to date from a format perspective, but also from a content perspective. Let's make sure that we have accurately reflected what each person is doing at the university. From there, we'll be looking at market competitive pay. And I'll go into this in more detail, but that's an important component of this. To understand what is the market for each job at Wichita State University. It would be an incomplete process, though, if I, as an outsider, was brought in just to cram market data down the university's throat. To say, well, here's what everybody else is doing, so that must be what you're doing. So we'll go through an internal equity process as well. Who's to say that the relationship in the external market from one job to another is a good fit for Wichita State University? You all may have different priorities or different internal equity considerations. We want to make sure that we capture those. In other words, we want to tailor a plan that makes sure that it fits within this university specifically, as opposed to the other Regents universities or higher ed in general, or what other organizations outside of higher ed are doing. So we want to tailor our process to meet Wichita State. From there, we'll probably be looking at creating salary structures, salary ranges, composed of minimums, midpoints, and maximums. And also looking at tying up loose ends with policies and procedures. So those tend to be more from an internal HR perspective to ensure that we handle things on a consistent basis as it relates to administering compensation. Finally, we'll be looking at what's called the Fair Labor Standards Act. That's the regulation that determines if jobs should be paid on an hourly basis or on a salaried basis, is kind of a simple way of thinking about it. And so we'll be making specific recommendations along those lines as well. Let's talk a little bit about expectations. The idea here is, as it comes to the compensation aspect, is we want to provide data to the president and to the leadership team. We need to help them understand how pay is or is not market competitive. Are there pockets that are above market or below market? And really do provide quality external analysis to provide that data to the leadership team. That said, it's not my expectation. You've heard it from the Senate presidents as well. There's no expectation that any salaries will be decreased as a result of this. That is not the intention whatsoever. As I said earlier, when employees hear that a compensation consultant has been heard, sometimes they think, thank goodness, you know, I've been overworked and underpaid for 30 years and Ed is here to save the day. And while I can tell you over the course of my career that may have happened in limited pockets, that's not really the purpose of this. Again, we're not looking to say, well, how much can we increase pay by? That's not what we're trying to do. We're really looking at it from a data-driven perspective to say, let's understand the data, let's understand the market for the jobs at the university, and take a balanced approach to that. By the same token, we're not the consultant. I tell my wife I look like George Clooney. You all, since I'm not doing this via teleconference, you all know better. But if you've seen the movie Up in the Air, I'm not the consultant who comes in to say, okay, who can we get rid of? How can we get rid of them? We're not looking to eliminate positions. And as some of you may remember from the movie Office Space as well, this poor guy loses his job, but nobody has the heart to tell him, so they just stop paying him, and he kind of sits in the corner and complains that he's not getting paid anymore. Again, our intention is not to eliminate positions. I'd take that a step further. I'd tell you in my career we've never recommended eliminating positions. That's not part of this process. Frankly, it's just not what we do. I don't have the expertise. That's not part of the analysis. So let's talk about the design itself. To date, as has been mentioned, we've been engaged to begin this process by 4 of the Regent's institutions. We've conducted a planning meeting. That was very helpful to me, again, as an outsider, to understand Wichita State University a little bit better. That's the easiest part of the process that I have throughout this entire analysis. I get to ask the questions on that one. And so I asked a lot of questions about the culture and values of the institution. What are the biggest challenges that Wichita State University is facing? How are compensation decisions made currently? What's working with the current system? What's not working? As we move away from the state classification system, what are the implications on that? What limitations do we have? What opportunities do we have? And as the people who were at the meeting will attest, I was frantically scribbling notes, but I wasn't writing down word for word exactly what people were saying. What I was doing is I was noting, okay, how does this impact the classification? How does this impact Fair Labor Standards Act? How does this impact job descriptions? How does this impact compensation? And so I was kind of translating those answers to think, what makes Wichita State unique in some regards? What makes Wichita State similar to other institutions that we've worked with in the past? And there are kind of bits and pieces all around. From there, we've started the data collection process and the job analysis questionnaire that we'll talk about ad nauseum today, certainly part of that data collection process. But we're collecting data from human resources, again, to help us dive deeper and understand Wichita State University as a unique institution, what makes you tick. And then the job analysis questionnaire is ready for distribution, and we'll go through the timeline and the process for that as well. That is really a critical part of the process, not only from a data collection perspective, but also from a timing perspective, in that while we can start to lay some of the framework of the analysis, that's really where we start to dive in with both feet. So from a job evaluation perspective, as the employees complete the job analysis questionnaires, and I'll walk you through in a little bit more detail, kind of what that looks like and what types of things we're asking there. That'll be used to evaluate we'll look at the job descriptions, but we're going to focus on the job analysis questionnaires where we have good data there. And we'll use that to identify potentially job families. Those would be groupings of jobs that have similar labor market characteristics. So for example, we may have a job family, and we haven't started this yet, for athletic-related positions. They may tend to move in the market in a similar fashion. That have common professions, common vocations. We may be able to create a hierarchy or a career path within that. Now, creating those actual career paths isn't part of this. That may be a next step. But again, starting to group those jobs together in like fashion. There are a number of kind of questions or misconceptions about the job analysis questionnaire, so I just want to address some of these, and these are things that typically come up at the end of the presentation, so I just figured I'd address them here. The first is, what if I'm not a good writer? Is that going to impact this analysis? You're asking me to write, potentially write a lot, and I'm not very comfortable with writing. What I'd tell you is that, A, we read tens of thousands of these over the course of a year. So we've seen, excuse me, all different writing styles. We've seen exceptional writing. We've seen people who don't write particularly well. There's nothing wrong with that. The good news is that this is not an English class. We're not going to grade you based on grammar or punctuation. We're trying to get to the nuts and bolts of what are the duties and responsibilities of the job. Some people take it a little bit further, and they think, boy, the more comprehensive I am, the higher my market value is going to be. There will be somebody at the university who will add 30 pages of addendum to the back of the questionnaire. And it will read something like this. Throughout the course of my job, I use pencils, pens, paper, calculators, computers at 10 key, Microsoft Excel, Microsoft Word, different versions of each of those possibly. While the detail is appreciated, that level of discrete detail is certainly not necessary. We're trying to get an understanding of what you do on a day-to-day basis. And if I just insert that, oh, I forgot stapler, I got to add that. If I put stapler in there, that's probably going to get me a raise. That's not the case. So while we welcome you, I don't want to suggest that you need to be less than comprehensive. We welcome your all's input. That's why we're going through the process. I just want to communicate to you all that that level of detail is not necessary. To that end, sometimes I'm questioning, does it really matter what I put in the questionnaire or if I even complete it at all? And the answer is absolutely. In order for us to provide the highest quality results possible, we need the most up-to-date and accurate information to begin with. Relying on job titles is not a great way to go through a classification process. What one organization calls an accountant, another may call an accounting clerk, a third may call a controller. Different organizations use different titles. By understanding those duties and responsibilities accurately, that allows us to ensure that we have appropriate comparisons throughout the process. If we don't have a job analysis questionnaire, if somebody chooses not to complete it, we're going to end up defaulting back to, again, a potentially old position description, and that just leaves us with less than optimal results. Finally, how much time does it take to complete? On average, I would say it's about a 45-minute process. That said, there's kind of a wide range. Some people 20 minutes in, out, done. That's probably a little bit too quick. Other people end up taking hours and are very comprehensive, very thoughtful in their approach. That may be a little bit, I don't want to say excessive, but longer than is necessary. 45 minutes is about average. The other thing that I'd add to that is that time spent completing the questionnaire is compensable time. And so if you're an hourly employee or on the clock, it shouldn't be done off the clock. So this is what the job analysis questionnaire looks like kind of generically. And the way I would describe the questionnaire is it's kind of like you're going to a cocktail party. And you meet somebody for the first time and they happen to be very, very nosy. And so you meet them and they say, what do you do for a living? Well, your natural answer would be to tell them your job title. I am the accountant. Tell me more. Well, then you might tell them your duties and responsibilities, or the primary duty of your job anyway. 3 sentences that kind of describes what that means. Well, I told you they were nosy, so they say, tell me more. Okay, well, there are really 5 essential functions to what I do, and I spend about half my time doing this, and 20% doing this, 10% doing that. Tell me more. Okay, well, here are some problems I solve. Tell me more. Here are some decisions I make. Tell me more. Well, I supervise 3 employees. They just kind of keep saying, tell me more, or drill down to another level of detail. So it starts at kind of a very high level, and as you get through it, it gets more and more detailed. It also asks a number of times for examples. That's a very important process or part of the form for us. And it helps us understand, it gives us context to some of the things that have been checked. From there, that questionnaire will be used for a number of processes. We talked earlier about writing the position descriptions. But by understanding the duties and responsibilities of each job, part of what we'll do, and I'll tell you, we read every word of every page of the questionnaire. It's not the most glamorous part of what we do, but we do read them. And we create, we call it the war room. We have spread out, we've got a conference room that locks, And we're spread out, and we are categorizing and going through the classification process to make sure that when we say, okay, this is, I've been using the example accountant, that everybody in that classification is essentially doing the same thing. So we're going through that process from a titling structure perspective. We're also going to be reviewing them, as I said, to determine, is this a job that is exempt or non-exempt as it relates to the Fair Labor Standards Act? Is it a job that is hourly and entitled to overtime? Is it a salaried position? And then finally, writing those job descriptions. That's a time-consuming process, but it's something that we take very seriously. If you all are going to take the time to complete the questionnaire, we owe it to you to take the time to put thought and effort into writing those job descriptions. As we look at the market pricing process, or the compensation piece of this, there are a number of considerations that we go through as we are benchmarking or market pricing different positions. So once we understand the role of the job from the job analysis questionnaire, we're then going to salary surveys to determine what is the competitive labor market for this position. As a firm, we spend about $80,000 a year on compensation salary survey data. Those surveys allow us to slice and dice the data based on these factors up here. Location. We will ask ourselves on a job-by-job basis, is this a job that is recruited in the Wichita labor market? Should it be broadened a little bit to be a little bit more of a statewide look, regional or national in scope? We'll be asking, where does the university recruit employees from? Where do they potentially lose employees to? And so that we can match the market data to the job and to the appropriate labor markets. The same is true of industry. Some jobs are found exclusively within higher education, so the market for those jobs would be higher education. Other jobs can be found across a broad spectrum of industries. And so we want to make sure that if it's a higher education specific job, that we have robust market data for higher education. If it's a broader job that can be found in broader industries, that we have market data that reflects those broader industries. And then finally, size of organization is another factor. Size tends to have the biggest impact for the most senior positions in the university. So you'd expect the CEO, for example, of a $1 billion company to earn more than the CEO of a $10 million company. There tends to be a strong correlation between size of organization and executive compensation. Some of the data that we do not use, and I think it's important to understand this. At the top is kind of what we do, and at the bottom is kind of what we don't. The data that we're using is very reliable data. It is statistically exceptionally robust. Many of the surveys have 10,000 companies and organizations participate. They're breaking down the data by for-profit, nonprofit, government, higher education, by industry, by geography, by size of organization. Not only that, they're going through a data scrubbing process to ensure that every piece of participant data in the survey is accurate. What we don't use is self-reported data, and this is most of the stuff that you'd find for free on the internet. I can log on to one of those free internet sites and ask, how much should a compensation consultant be paid? They'll say, okay, Ed, why don't you tell us about your pay so we can include that in our database? And so I include my pay and bonus and benefits and maybe years of experience, whatever questions they ask. And they give me their analysis that says, Ed, here's how much we think you should be paid. And not only that, I'm going to give you 3 pages of how to beat up your boss to get a raise, some tips. If I don't like that answer, I can log back onto that website and say, ask the exact same question. How much should a compensation consultant in St. Louis earn? Okay, Ed, tell us about your compensation. Well, I'll just put in $10 million. Put that in your database. Maybe I'll do that 10, 15, 30 times. Let me drive whatever answer I want. And so self-reported data is not something that we'll be looking at. It is statistically valid data that is provided by HR departments across the country. We also tend not to bump into the Department of Labor data as much. They tend to conduct their salary surveys every 2 years. Frankly, from what I've seen, that we tend not to use it much at all. Typically, the data is a little bit on the low side, and there are some questions about their data collection methodology that I've just never become comfortable with, and so it's another data source that we don't use. From there, as we look at, again, providing the data to the president and to the leadership team, once we've benchmarked each job, and in this case we have job XYZ, which is just a generic job, and we determine that the market value of the job is $35,455 a year. We would then create salary structures composed of grades, and each grade would have a minimum, a midpoint, and a maximum. Typically, though we're not to this point in the process yet, typically the minimum would be designed to represent attractive entry-level pay. The midpoint would represent market competitive pay, and the maximum would represent the maximum value of the job to the university. In this example, we said we have job XYZ at $35,455 as the market value. We would simply look at the grades to determine which grade has a midpoint closest to our market value. In this case, it's grade 2 with a midpoint of $35,618 a year. As a result, job XYZ would be slotted into grade 2. Now, we may also have a job with a benchmark value of $35,000 even. That would also end up in a grade 2 because we're grouping jobs with similar market values into similar grades. To cover next steps, Frankie, do you want to, or I'm sorry, Cheryl handle that? To go through the specifics, and then, as I said, we'll have time for questions at the end.
This slide gives you an overview of the next steps and timeline for the process here at WSU. First step will be to distribute the job analysis questionnaire to all UP and USS employees to complete the form and return it to their supervisor no later than February 13th. You will receive the forms on this Wednesday, December 17th. They'll have instructions with them. Each section will have instructions giving you details on how to complete it. The top box of the questionnaire will already be completed for you. It has your WSU ID, position code, job code, some information like that on it. There will be a cover letter that's attached to it. They'll have additional information. And then once submitted and reviewed by your supervisors, they will need to have that submitted to HR no later than February 20th. Okay? Then HR will coordinate sending all of the data into CBIZ. Resources are available to help you as you're going through this. You have a flyer that you received when you came in today. It has a lot of information on it regarding what's available. There's a website that's been set up for the market study. It will have a lot of frequently answered questions on there, other information about the job study going on. It will also have slides from today's presentation, additional information, and it will continue to be updated throughout the process. There's also an email that has been established for communication for this project. It is marketstudy@wichita.edu. You're welcome to send emails or questions to that address and they'll be answered, or you may receive communications from this email address. There's also work sessions that are scheduled throughout January and February. You have the times, dates, and locations listed on your flyer today, and those will also be listed on the website. We encourage you to attend. You can receive help and questions answered while you're completing the job study and the JAQ, and you'll be able to complete that during your regular hours. You'll need to arrange time with your supervisor in order to come to it, but this is to be completed during your regular work hours. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is ask the Human Resources Leadership Team, members of it, to come forward to this stage. and they're going to be available to answer questions along with Ed. Once again, Frankie Kirkendall is our Director of HR. Matthew Johnston is the Associate Director, Employee Relations. Lana Anthus, Associate Director, Operations. Kim Sinelli, Assistant Director of Benefits. We're going to open the floor to questions. If you have a question, if you'll raise your hand. We do have Shelley Kellogg and Tammy Raines who are going to be going around with microphones. They'll bring the microphone to you and allow you to answer your question. Ask your question. Okay? Who would have a question? It's a quiet Monday morning. Okay? Yes.
Okay, so say there are people that have a position description that, not me, but someone else that may be old. Where would we find that to have a starting point?
You can either send an email to the market study email address that's listed there, or you may contact Libby Gilbert in the Office of Human Resources. We have position descriptions.
Does this affect all staff, like temp staff also, or just benefit eligible?
It affects the benefits eligible positions.
Okay, so I see that this is just UP and USS, not faculty. Is there going to be something with faculty eventually, or is it just us?
At this point, we're just doing the USS and the UP.
Will the salaries be influenced to help retain and be an incentive to attract employees?
I think that at this point, we're looking at what is market competitive pay. And so as we look at what the recommendations will be, we're essentially going to be providing data to the president, to the leadership team, that can allow them to make data-driven decisions. So I don't know if the answer to your question, I don't think that's been determined quite yet. I think at this point we're looking at the data, what are the results, and what the results of those that data will be, I think is yet to be determined.
Some of us have really bad handwriting, and we'd like to save some trees, and I didn't know whether you're going to give us an opportunity to complete this online.
We are going to be distributing all of the JAQ's hard copy, as well as our goal is to email an individualized copy to all employees by no later than Wednesday. So you will have the opportunity to complete it through email and type into it via soft copy, or complete a hard copy via the paper that will be distributed as well.
You mentioned that there's not necessarily a guarantee that anyone's salary will be changed as a result, but as you look at the data that you are requesting, is there a timeline in place to adjust salaries so that they are fair and equitable across the board? And if so, what is that timeline?
Those timelines have not been established at this time. What we're going to do is provide this information to the president's executive team.
Do you know whose responsibility it will be to ensure that the equity is achieved? Meaning, will it fall to the department? Will it fall to the division? Will it fall to the university overall? Do we know that?
It would be the responsibility of the department, your vice president, the executive team, and the HR department.
Okay.
Yes. Some employees may have difficulty, for whatever reason, completing the job analysis. Is it the work sessions that will help them achieve that?
Yes, that is our goal. The work sessions are intended to allow employees to come participate, collaborate, and work on it together, but also for them to be staffed. So our staff will be there to be able to answer questions and assist any employees that need assistance completing those job analysis questionnaires. Additionally, we're encouraging collaboration of like jobs. So if there are, using Ed's example, if there are 5 accountants that all do the same thing, they can get together and work on the JAQ together and work on that and collaborate.
And Randy, if I can add to that, in addition to the work sessions that are scheduled, we're willing to come to your division, your department, and schedule individual sessions for your custodial staff, your trades sections as well.
So for the supervisors, what's the expectation on us in terms of, are we just supposed to make sure that it's complete, or do we need to edit, or what's our role?
You know, we look to the supervisors to really do a couple of things. I'd tell you, in my experience, 90% of the time, maybe 95% of the time, the supervisors have a comment that says, this is accurate and up to date and makes sense, I agree. You know, sometimes there are employees who are a little bit shy, they're not selling themselves, and so oftentimes the supervisor will say, well, they do all the things that they've included in the questionnaire. They forgot to mention that you know, they're also responsible for this other thing that's quite important. And so we're looking for those types of things. There's also, every once in a while, there's an employee who's, you know, will complete the questionnaire and will say something along the lines of, I run Wichita State University, and the supervisor will say, well, they run the photocopier for Wichita State University. There's a distinction. So we're just, it's really a double check to make sure that the information that we're getting is as accurate as possible.
You made a reference that you were working with other Board of Regents schools in the state. My question is, when you have all of your data from these, is the goal to have everyone statewide with the universities to be at the same levels as far as their salaries and their position descriptions, or are each one going to be an individual university that's looked at in that perspective?
It's a great question, something I should have addressed earlier. The idea is that, I guess the short answer to your question is there will be individual results, an individual look at each university, individual recommendations, individual markets, and the like. That said, you know, as part of the process, we expect that there will be some economies of scale to looking at 4 universities at the same time. It's just, there are natural economies there. But the results, the analysis, the data that goes into it, each university will be handled discreetly. It's a good question, and I appreciate you teeing me up to clarify that.
You mentioned there is not a timeline, but when are the results supposed to be shared with the university?
At this point, I would tell you that it hasn't been finalized yet. A lot of it has to do, the ball's in our court once all the job analysis questionnaires are completed. At this point, we're looking at June for initial results to be shared back with the Wichita State University folks. That said, until we kind of get that ball completely into our court, we haven't set a specific date for those preliminary results, but that's to give you a sense of the timeline. That's kind of what we're looking at.
Quite a few years ago, the state did a study that found that we weren't at market value, and that compensation plan was never completed. And I had thought that that was part of our decision to leave the state system because we would be brought up to market value, but that doesn't seem like it's the case now.
That market study was under the civil service employee system, and we are no longer a part of that. And one of the first things that we need to do to move this university forward and empower ourselves with the information necessary in order to create the compensation plan that this university needs is to go through this study. So this is the first step towards that. We cannot promise any salary increases as a result of this study, but what we can promise is we are being very diligent to empower ourselves to have the right information to be a very market competitive employer. And the first step is this, and gathering information from our employees to understand exactly what everybody is doing. And so that starts with everyone participating in this JAQ.
Within this process, what accommodations have you made for employees who are not native speakers of English and may not be able to understand your questionnaire?
When Randy's session asked a question earlier, I shared that we are going to be scheduling individual sessions with those sections, for example, the custodial specialist area. So we're going to be meeting with them, and possibly, if they're unable to complete the JAQs, we will assist them in that area. That would become HR's responsibility to assist.
Does gender affect the data that is involved in the market values and whatnot?
I didn't, I've got a bright light in my face, so I didn't see exactly where that, okay. Thank you. The answer is absolutely not. We have no information related to gender that we're looking at. It's not a consideration whatsoever.
The question was asked when this information would be available. You said it would be available, you hope, in June. Will it be shared with us at that time?
Let me answer the first part of the question. At that time, the answer is absolutely not. That would not be my recommendation anyway. That would be the timing for a very first pass of our analysis or preliminary results. From there, there's typically a process of cleaning up the data. Those preliminary results will not be perfect. The data will not be perfect. So at that time, there's still some cleanup and evolution that needs to occur. In terms of how results will be shared or not shared, I'd like somebody else to answer that.
We haven't decided that yet. We're going to have a conversation with the president's executive team. That data will be shared with them first, and then we will communicate that information to the university.
Additionally, I would just like to say that while there are going to be a lot of data gathering and a lot of facts to be shared with employees, and a lot of you are very interested and eager to learn, as well as we are, we want to be able to share accurate information, and I respect Ed's perspective that we are going to be working on this, but while we're working on it, we're going to be as transparent as possible. We've established a lot of different modes of communication for you guys to express your concerns. We've established frequently asked questions and different things, and we'll continue to develop those things. So if you have questions or if you have feedback, please, I encourage you, please participate in the process, be as involved as you would like to be, and when it is appropriate for us to share, we will share, and we will be as transparent as possible throughout this process.
Will the data that's collected, will that compare the unclassified professionals to the USS job classifications?
Again, I'm looking around trying to figure out where the question came from. Okay, thank you. Right in the blind spot from the light. The answer is that we're going to be looking at the duties and responsibilities of the job. And so I recognize that for the people in the room, whether USS, UPS, those classifications are very important to you as individuals. From a market perspective, and as we look at the data, it has no impact on the market value of the job, and so it's not something that we're going to be looking at. we're going to be looking at what is the job, what is the market for that job, and make the assessment from there. So while it's obviously a very different categorization than gender, it's not something that's being considered either. Duties and responsibilities, how do those compare to the market is really the consideration.
Okay, I have another question too. If you're just starting a brand new position and you're not sure what your job duties will entail, how do you come up with your job description?
I would encourage you to sit down with the supervisor and discuss what those duties and responsibilities are. I think that's a good opportunity to establish within the new role what are the expectations, what are the duties and responsibilities. And by the same token, I think, you know, if a supervisor gets a form back and they're reading the duties and responsibilities that the employee completed, and they're thinking that isn't at all what I think the duties and responsibilities are, it's an opportunity for the supervisor and employee to sit down and discuss those things. Let's wait.
Yes.
I think you need the microphone. It's coming your way.
Thank you. Okay, we just changed from the classified system a while back, and I'm finally getting around to thinking about some inequities that have existed for a lot of reasons, thinking about making some changes, and then I noticed there's the part about the freeze on that kind of activity at this point. Is that correct? And how long will that freeze be in effect? And, you know, maybe slow up the process of taking care of inequities that we're starting to recognize.
Randy, I'm not sure of what freeze you're referencing. Can you elaborate?
Well, something I read in relation to this, just whatever was put out in the strategic communication blurb, if I remember right, they were asking us to freeze that kind of activity for a period of time.
What kind of activity?
Maybe upgrades, just taking care of inequities within shops where maybe because of the prior state market studies, there were some areas that were left behind when other areas maybe took a couple jumps. And well, maybe you need to look into that.
All I can respond is I'm not aware of any freezes that would allow supervisors to evaluate current position descriptions and offer any either it be job openings, posting new positions, and or any particularly opportunities for promotion. I'm not aware of any freezes that are being implemented from the university's perspective.
I think I clicked on the link on the strategic communication, President Barto's announcement of this meeting. If you click on the link, I think then there's some of that.
Okay, we'll look into it. Again, I'm not aware of any freezes that is being put on the university or limiting any university management from proceeding through existing university policy.
Ed, would you go back and clarify on, if I'm correct, regarding the question of gender and USS or UP? When you analyze the information, you take off the identifying information, correct? So you don't even see someone's name.
Yeah, that's kind of a little bit of how the sausage is made, but happy to go through that. You know, as a compensation consulting firm, there are a number of shortcuts that an employee, somebody on my team, could take if they chose to, and we try to eliminate some of those things. What I mean by that is when we're going through and benchmarking a job, so we have a questionnaire, and we've been talking about accountant just as an example, And so we have the job analysis questionnaire for the accountants. We've been through classification. We've determined these people are all doing the same thing. It's could create bias among us if we had access to current salaries, because we may be looking for data that kind of matches up for that because it seems right. So we remove that information from what I or anybody on my team would have as they're doing the benchmarking. Same thing with gender, same thing with race. If oftentimes typically we don't ask for that information, but if it's sent to us, we remove that information so that the assessment is based on the job analysis questionnaire, and we have access to that information alone, so that any of that other information doesn't create any bias one way or the other. It's duties and responsibilities. It's very based directly on those duties and responsibilities. And frankly, I guess to take that just a little bit of a step further, that's one of the advantages that we have as outsiders to the university, is that we don't know the names. We don't know the personalities or the politics or anything else. We're kind of looking at it from a purely data-driven perspective and making those assessments. But that's also kind of one of the reasons why there's typically preliminary results, and then we've got some cleanup to do, is that we may not understand some of the intricacies as well, and so we need to kind of put that lens on and make sure that we capture those things. Does that kind of address what you're talking about? Yeah.
If we have access to salary information, say for example, if we're a member of a professional organization with other positions similar to ours at other universities, and we have salary information already, do you want that? Will you consider that kind of information?
What I would suggest in that situation is that you send it to the HR department, and they'll send it to us, and we're happy to review those things. What we find is that if it fits within kind of our criteria for the quality of data, we're happy to include it. Typically, and I have no idea what your position is, what the association is, but speaking broadly, typically the data that comes from associations doesn't have the statistical robustness we're looking for, but we will look at the methodology and make an assessment to say, does it make sense to include this? Would this enhance the reliability of the report, or is it information that doesn't quite meet that test, and we already have better data? So the short answer is absolutely, please send it to the HR group, and we're happy to assess that.
You were mentioning that you will not have any information or current salaries, but you're going to have all of the data. But when you put that all together to present to the president and their executive team, are you going to put that in? I mean, somewhere you're going to need to attach the information that you have to a position number or something, so they'll even know which positions may not be getting the equal amount of salary or whatever. So I'm a little confused. So how you're going to not know any of that information, how you're going to transfer your report over without them being able to know who is getting what?
Sure. Allow me to clarify. We will have access to that information. In other words, we'll get a spreadsheet that has employees' names, job titles, salaries. We will collect all of that information. However, when we start setting up our tools to do an assessment of the market value, we will not include that information in that tool. So as the team is going through and benchmarking a job, they can't just pull that up and use it as a cheat sheet to say, well, this job's currently at $30,000 a year. My market data, it kind of looks like 50 to me, but I'm probably wrong, so I'm going to kind of default back to that 30 level. I'm going to find something that is a better fit for current pay. And so we don't have that as we're doing the analysis. Then at the end of the process, absolutely, we bring in actual pay so that when we're providing results, we can run those comparisons. So it's when we're going through the process in the middle, we don't show it to the team. It is hidden, and they don't have access to it, so they can't use it as a cheat sheet, so to speak.
So as a part of transparency, and this might be a little brass, but how much is this costing us?
Is your question is how much is it costing in consulting fees? Is your question about our fees? Okay. It's public information. I'm not shy about that. I don't remember the exact numbers. If you want the exact numbers, I suspect the HR folks can get that to you. We applied 2 sets of discounts to this. One is because we're looking at everybody except for the faculty folks. There's a 25% discount for that. Because we're going through it with the multiple universities, there was another 25% discount. So compared to Wichita State University doing this on its own, there's over a 50% discount associated with that. That said, we ended up, I believe, in the $120,000. Is that about right? Okay. So it's about $120,000.
In addition to what a what a position description is, also the person in that position their salary is affected by how long they've been in that position. So how does your analysis take that into account?
So that's a great question. The analysis is looking at the job itself, but then as I had the slide up there that kind of showed the ranges. And so you would expect somebody who's been with the university for a long time, maybe a top performer, something along those lines, to be higher in the range. You'd expect potentially a new employee, a poor performer, somebody who's recently been promoted into a role, they may be lower in the range. And so the range are those parameters for the job, but then where somebody fits within those within that range is oftentimes where longevity would be taken into account.
Is the cost of living considered in all this?
The short answer or the easy answer is yes, but let me qualify that just a little bit. We don't specifically look at cost of living information. What we look at is cost of labor information. And so we're looking not at what does it cost an employee to purchase a gallon of gasoline or a loaf of bread. That would be a cost of living consideration. Rather, since we're talking about compensation, we're looking at what is the cost of an accountant, of a CFO, of an administrative assistant. What are the salary differentials based on geography? So they tend to go hand in hand with one another, but salary differentials tend not to fluctuate quite as much as cost of living differentials do. So it's kind of a lengthy answer. The answer is not specifically cost of living, but it's that same thought process. We're just looking at salary differentials, not cost of living differentials.
So one of the things that we talked about is compensation is being looked at. Are other forms of benefits going to be looked at as far as comparing that among the industry? So like flexible hours and other fringe benefits, would that be looked at as well?
That's not part of the scope of the project at this point, no.
Okay, if there are no additional questions, we're going to go ahead and wrap up for today. First of all, we appreciate all the questions. There were some fantastic questions and a lot more information that was shared. You will probably have additional questions once you get your job analysis questionnaire. Left the slide up here that has contact information on it, session information on it. You have your flyer that also has all of it on there. Matt made a very good comment that it's very transparent. So if you have questions, please get a hold of through the website, through the email, come to one of the work sessions, and anyone would be glad to answer those for you. Thank you.